Good evening, folks.
We have a wonderful evening's entertainment lined up for you, one that will provide several hours of pleasurable relaxation and diversion for you and your family. We hope you'll make this a weekly visit. Bring the family. Bring your friends. We hope you have a wonderful time. Come back soon.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Knights of the Pageless Library. This is an audiobook discussion podcast. I am Ryan Knight, and I will be your host for this episode. And on today's episode, I am taking a look at Project Hail Mary, written by Andy Weir and narrated by Ray Porter. This episode is going to be just a little bit different. I am not going to take nearly as much time on this one. I have a couple other episodes that I am working on that I am taking far too long to get out. That's if you follow me at all, you'll know that this is probably the longest in between episodes I've gone, and I do apologize for that. I know I am not a very prolific creator I say with quotations, but I would like to continue doing this, and I would like to get a little more consistent with it. And I think to do that, I am going to have to put a little bit less time into doing Spark Note style episodes and doing a little bit more off the cuff episodes. So this one might not have a lot of editing. I might say and a lot because I probably won't go back and take that stuff out. So just bear with me. If you do appreciate the media that I create, please let me know. Give me a thumbs up, 5 stars, 1 star, thumbs down. I don't even know. Give me whatever you feel I deserve. But I will say that I appreciate that you are here, and I appreciate that you are giving me your time, because I know that is possibly the most valuable thing you have to give in this life. So thank you for that. Now, on with the episode. Project Hail Mary was originally published in 2021, and it was published by Ballantine Books. The audiobook version that I will be reviewing was also published in 2021 by Audible Studios. I did get this one on Audible, and I will say, once again, if you got somewhere else you get your audiobooks, please let me know. I'd love to check them out. So the author of this book, Mr. Andy Weir, kind of got famous because of his book, The Martian. Realistically, it looks like The Martian and Project Hail Mary are his 2 biggest books that he has written thus far. And it says that he is known for his science fiction, scary, and fantasy. Scary sounds like a very interesting genre. I didn't know we started calling it scary instead of horror. Maybe they're 2 different things. I guess I should look into that. It really looks like The Martian was kind of just Andy Weir's big break. It actually says on Audible that he was a software engineer for almost 20 years before he actually got his break with The Martian, which allowed him now to follow his true passion of writing, which that's very exciting to me. I like stories like that. All right, so what about Mr. Ray Porter? Ray Porter is an incredibly prolific narrator, it looks like, especially on Audible. He has over 400 titles to his name, which is very impressive. What did I think about his performance in Project Hail Mary? I think Ray Porter does a very good job. I am just going to probably leave it at that. I think his range is good. I think that his tone is excellent, especially for this book. I think his voice fits the main character of this book particularly well. I mostly listen to this book because I see this one come up all the time, especially on some Facebook groups that I not necessarily frequent, but that I take a look at, and that their stuff pops up in my feed every once in a while. About audiobooks, and one of the books that I see mentioned the most is this book, Project Hail Mary. I think a lot of that comes down to Ray Porter's performance. I do think that his performance is very easy to get behind, especially maybe if you are new to audiobooks. This one would be very easy to go into. His voices are good for each character. They do some very interesting editing stuff in this book that I don't often see, where one of our characters actually has kind of a synthesized voice, and some of the stuff is actually changed digitally, which, in my opinion, enhances the book. I do think that that went over very, very well in this book, especially given what this character was supposed to sound like. I think that it probably took a lot of the burden off of Ray Porter, probably being given the opportunity to have that editing done, just because, and I'll get into it later, I don't want to spoil anything, but given what this character was supposed to be, I think that trying to perform that voice just using your own voice, it would have been doable, but I think it would have been both very difficult, and it wouldn't have felt nearly the way that it was supposed to come across in the book. So I think that was a good choice, and I will talk about it later once I pass the spoiler wall. But as far as his overall performance, I will say I understand why this book comes up on a lot of people's list, probably as the best audiobook they've ever listened to. I see that a lot, actually, which is why I just had to check this one out. So stick around to see what I actually have to say about this one. So this book, if you couldn't tell by both the name and possibly the cover of the book, is a science fiction novel. It starts out a bit hard sci-fi in terms of there's a lot of numbers, a lot of math, a lot of things that are grounded in real Earth science. It kind of devolves away from that, in my opinion, but so like if you're looking for something similar to like the three-body problem, where a lot of the things are grounded in real science, that's not quite what this is. It kind of starts out that way, but I'll say something weird it's in a very gentle way. That it sounds weird when I say it that way, but I don't think it's going to drive people who don't like sci-fi away from it, if that makes sense. And again, I think that's why this one comes up on a lot of people's list as an excellent audiobook. This book clocks in right at 16 hours and 10 minutes. But on Audible, I do see something that says here, please note, to accommodate this audio edition, some changes to the original text have been made with the approval of author Andy Weir. Now, I don't necessarily think that means this is an abridged version. It says right here that it is an unabridged audiobook. However, I think I know what might be going on here. There are some things that, if you were looking at them on the page, would probably come across very easily. But if someone were to read them to you, you would get completely lost. So I'm sure there are some very subtle changes that are made. And I'm sure it's not something that, even if you read the physical copy and then listened to the book, you probably wouldn't even notice them, if I had to guess. Okay, on to the big questions. I'm just going to dive right into this. So is this book easy to follow? Yes, it is extremely easy to follow. Again, another reason I think it shows up on people's, number one audiobook. I'm just going to keep calling it that because I think it's funny how often I see people. Okay, so my audio cut out really hard right there because I'm having some technical difficulties. And I know nobody wants to hear about this, right? You don't want to hear about what goes on behind the scenes. But this is another reason that I've been struggling to get this podcast out, any episode in any decent amount of time, because I just the weirdest shit keeps happening. So I'm just going to call it like it is. Anyway, back to where I was. Yeah, this, I can see for sure why this is on a lot of people's top list of possibly the best podcast they've ever listened to. Yeah. The best audiobook they've ever listened to. Both Ray Porter's performance as well as the ease of which this kind of goes down is very evident as to why that shows up a lot. And again, is this one easy listening? Yeah, absolutely. Ray Porter makes this one super easy to listen to. I mean, during the entire time. I even slowed this one down to the standard normal listening rate. Normally I listen to books between 1.25 and 1.5 speed. Not because I'm trying to hurry through them or anything like that. It's just sometimes there's some books where if you listen to it at 1.5 speed, it sounds more like somebody normally talking to me. And then if you slow it down to normal speed, for some reason it sounds like it's in slow motion. This one I started out with it at a higher listening speed, and I ended up turning it down to 1 because there was just something that sounded off about it. And I am glad that I slowed it down and listened to it at normal speed. So take that for what you will. That's just kind of a nerdy little interjection there. Okay, so now possibly the moment you've all been waiting for, my overall recommendation on this one. Again, I listened to this because I'm not going to lie, it seemed incredibly hyped, right? This often, when you go to Audible's website, this is one that's kind of on the banner that like floats across the top. You see it all the time in conversations about audiobooks, right? People recommend this one all the time. So I was like, well, I guess I got to check this book out. I mean, I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I got to listen to the one that everybody seems to be talking about, right? So I picked it up. I listened to it, started listening to it a second time shortly before I recorded this, just because I wanted to see if my mind changed. I didn't make it very far in. I made it a couple hours in, and my mind didn't change. Do I recommend this book? Yeah, I do recommend this book. I think most people could easily listen to this book. Like I said, even though it is sci-fi, I don't think it is sci-fi to the point where people wouldn't enjoy it. It has some very cool sci-fi elements in it, but nothing so crazy that it's not like Dune or something like that could easily turn people away because it is like, it's the sci-fi lovers sci-fi. This is not that book. This book is easy to listen to for anybody. I would say I would recommend this even to like first-time audiobook listeners. I think Ray Porter's performance in this one really, really shines as a standout here. Like I said before, his voice ranges are good. He does good, unique characters, and again, I'll bring up the digital editing and stuff once I pass the spoiler wall. All of that stuff combined, though, I can definitely see why so many people love this book, and I would recommend that. However, I honestly did not enjoy this book as much as I think other people do. I honestly saw posts of people saying that they're only, 2 chapters in and they love it. It's the most amazing thing they've ever heard. And I just could not figure out where this is coming from. Is it good? Yeah, it is. Is it the most amazing book I've ever listened to? No. No, it's not. I think that it is a good listen. And I think, like I said, I'm just repeating myself here, but I think anybody could listen to this. I don't think that this is targeting any one specific genre of what people enjoy. And that's good. That's excellent that so many people can enjoy it. But I guess I don't understand the hype. I'm clearly in the minority here. Let me see. Let's see what Audible actually says. So, holy shit. Okay. This book has, as of time of recording, 185,000 reviews. That's insane. Okay, that's possibly, I'd have to do some digging, but that is an insane number of reviews for a book. And even more insane is this is rated 4.9 stars out of 185,000 reviews on Audible. And right underneath that, on Audible, you can see that on Goodreads, the website that, a lot of people go to review stuff, it has 4.5 stars out of 5 with 710,000 reviews. Those are insane numbers. I've been listening to audiobooks for a long, long time, and I think I would struggle to find any other book with nearly that many reviews. I don't even care about the star rating. You would struggle to find any other book with that many reviews in general. So clearly I am in the vast minority here. If I personally were going to give this book a star rating, I think you can rate, let's just see here. I think you can rate it on the overall, the performance, and the story. I would give the performance 5 stars. I'd give the performance 4 stars. I'll just be honest here. I'd probably give it 4 stars. I do think Ray Porter does a great job. I would give the story 3 stars. I think the story was good, but definitely not amazing. There's actually a lot of stuff in it that I didn't like, just straight out didn't like. And I really, really did not like the ending. So I would give it a 3 stars for the story, and I would probably give it an overall of between 3 and 4 stars. This by no means, blew my socks off, like I was possibly thinking it would have, because of these numbers. So somebody please explain to me what is going on here. Did I miss something? Did I listen to a different book? I mean, I guess I don't know why I'm not feeling the hype that everybody else is feeling about this. I mean, just looking down I'm just scrolling through reviews right now, just out of curiosity. Every single one that I've scrolled so far through several pages is 5 stars on everything. The overall, the performance, and the story. It's almost like people are scared to nitpick this one. Should I be watching my back? Is somebody going to come up and put a bullet in the back of my head for nitpicking this? I know I probably sound like a crazy person right now, but I really, truly am trying to wrap my head around what it is that makes this book so amazing in most people's ears. I'm coining that, by the way. I think that was pretty clever. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not gonna tell you shouldn't listen to this. I'm not gonna say that. I do think that most people would enjoy this book, clearly. But in my opinion, I don't get it. I don't understand the overwhelming amount of positivity towards this book. So that's my 2 cents on the matter. If you feel different, or if you want to tell me what I missed, please feel free to do so, whether that's in the comments below this, or you straight up just email me and let me know what I'm missing. kotpl.pod at gmail.com is the easiest way to do that. You'll find it in the description of wherever it is you're listening to this. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. I knew this episode wasn't going to be very long. I will go past the spoiler wall. I will talk about the story a little bit because I have some nitpicks to share there. So if you are interested in this and you haven't already listened to it, which judging by all this other stuff, everybody in the world has listened to this and everybody has already rated it 5 stars. But if you are one of the few who has not listened to this and you don't want to spoil for you, please pause the podcast now because I'm going to pass the spoiler wall and I'm going to spoil the story. And if you pause it now, I would just ask that you please come back and hear what I have to say about it once you do actually listen to the book. Either way, I appreciate your time. So thanks for stopping by. Okay, now with all of that insane rambling out of the way, and I do feel a bit insane, right? I mean, it does feel like I'm completely missing something. But so Project Hail Mary opens up with our main character waking up and not knowing where he's at. Okay, so right away, I have a slight problem with this. I think stories should start at the beginning. I'm not a huge fan of using we're going to start the story here and then we're going to go back and talk about what happened before this. It's a good hook, and it's also a good way to leave things unsaid that you can fill in later. It's almost like a cheat code in my opinion. Now, I'm not a writer, so you can take everything I say with a dash of salt. I understand that. But for me personally, it almost feels a little bit of a cop-out to not start your story where your story's supposed to start. This was a good way of doing it. So our character has a form of amnesia, and we're going to find out why a little bit later. So he wakes up, and everything is very unclear to him. And all of a sudden, he's woken up by this computer. This computer is saying a couple things. It starts asking him questions. These robotic arms come down and start tending to him, and he realizes he's hooked up to all kinds of stuff. IV tubes, catheter, all the fun stuff. And certain things start popping up into his head, right? Like he realizes he knows how to do math very quickly off the top of his head. He knows once he looks around and sees like some laboratory equipment, he knows what all of it is. But he essentially has forgotten completely who he is. And once he actually gets up and he starts moving around, he doesn't understand. It just doesn't quite feel right either, this room that he is stuck in. It's a relatively small room. He notices there are 2 other beds in the room with little robotic tending arms also, and those 2 people are also dead. So right away, off to a very strange start. He also realizes they're completely decayed, so he can't figure out why he would be left in a room in a coma with 2 people who are clearly have been dead for a long time. If he was at a hospital, obviously they should have removed those people. One of the first tipping points to the story is that I can't remember if he drops something or I think it's when he falls to the floor. He realizes something felt weird about the way he falls, almost like it was too fast. And he does a couple kind of little janky science experiments, and he realizes that he's not in Earth gravity, 1G, okay? He's in like a 1.5G range. And he thinks about it, and the only way he could be in something like that is if he was in, maybe he was on Earth and they were using some sort of centrifugal force to increase the gravity, or if he was in space. So then we start getting some interesting little tidbits here. And actually, the way that one of the first little memory dumps comes up is because he falls to the floor and the catheter rips out of the end of his penis. Okay, and he notices there's a trickle of blood from it on the floor, and it looks like a thin red line. Boom, flashback to something he remembers. Now, I don't really know how I feel about this. again, I like when stories start at the beginning. But again, this is an interesting way to tell a story. So we go back and we get this kind of scene of our main character, we don't know his name yet because he doesn't know his own name, talking to some gal about this thing. And we'll just go ahead and say it's the Petrova line. It's basically something that has been noticed in space, and it looks like this thin red line. Okay, so that's how that memory got jogged in his brain, which is fine. Coming back to the present, though, I think this is what starts to bother me, okay, is there are certain things that start setting off our main character's memories to jog them back, and then we, as the listener, get to hear them, okay? But that's kind of also where my issues lie with this book. This book is literally written like a string of consciousness, okay? Our main character is essentially talking to himself through a lot of it, and we just happen to be in his head hearing it. That's kind of an interesting way of telling a story. I mean, it's no different really than you listening to this podcast right now. You're literally just hearing my thoughts come out of my head. But for some reason, I take issue with it. And I can't quite put my finger on what it is that I don't like about it. But I can also see why other people would like it. I'll just leave it at that. But just know that I take issue with this kind of string of consciousness, us inside of the main character's head, hearing his thoughts type of storytelling. I understand that's what a first-person story is, and that's clearly how this is written, is all from the main character's perspective and point of view. We just happen to be like his brain while he's doing it. So coming back to present, the computer won't let our main character out of the hospital thing until he tells it his name. He ends up remembering his name. His name is Ryland Grace. So once he tells the computer this, he's let out of this room. This is all we're going to find out later. This is all basically to make sure he's in a state to accomplish what he's doing, essentially. So Ryland is in space, and through a series of events, we find out he is on the ship Project Hail Mary, roll credits. And through a series of these memory dumps that we get, we find out that Earth's soul, is slowly dying. And we find out that it's dying because it actually is being consumed by an alien life form. Or many, many, many billions of alien life forms, I should say. They're these teeny tiny little objects, aliens, that we will come to know as astrophage. Now, why does Ryland know this? Because Ryland was actually one of the first who was contacted by this, she's not even really a government agent. I don't even know exactly what she is. Okay, I just looked it up real quick because I couldn't even remember her name, even though they say it 5 million times in the book. Eva Strat, or just Strat, was a former European Space Agency administrator, basically given keys to the kingdom for this project to essentially save humanity, okay? Because they realize that if the sun continues to dim as it is doing, then after about 30 years' time, the heat getting to Earth will not be enough to sustain life as we know it, basically. So everybody's doomed at this point. So they realize that these aliens, these astrophage, are going back and forth, I believe, to Venus. Between Venus and the sun is where this stuff is most concentrated. Sorry, that was my phone. See? A bunch of stuff always just seems to happen when I'm trying to do this. So Ryland is one of the first ones approached by Strat because Ryland had written this paper essentially that was saying he doesn't think that life needs water to form. And this was kind of frowned upon in the science community, and he was kind of shunned out of the science community for it because everybody else thinks that he's crazy for saying such a thing. So now he is a a middle school, biology teacher. It's another thing that kind of sticks in my craw a little bit, as weird as that is to say. I think he's like a microbiologist, I believe is what Ryland is supposed to be. But for some reason, he's just good at everything. It's another thing that kind of bothers me about the story is that he has such incredibly strong plot armor. And obviously because he has to, because he's one of the only friggin' characters in the book. But at no point did I really feel like he was in any sort of real danger, even though the book kept trying to tell me he's always in danger? And realistically, the end of the book solidifies that thought, unfortunately, and I'll get to that in a little bit. So Ryland remembers what he is on this mission to do. So they found out, they did this crazy scan thing of all these freaking stars, like as far as they could, and they realized there was one star that didn't seem to be diminishing like all of the other ones. Pretty much every star that they could scan, aside from this one, was diminishing. And the one star that wasn't having issues was called Tau Ceti. So Ryland on the Project Hail Mary is on his way to Tau Ceti because they want to go there and find out why it is this star is not diminishing. So the ship, the Project Hail Mary, actually uses the astrophage aliens as its propulsion system because they are kind of like this incredible little life form that can store a ton of energy and release it all at once very quickly. And Ryland happens to be the one who discovers a lot of these things in his little bit of research that he ends up doing on these aliens. Again, not so much that bothers me. It's the sole focus on this character being able to do anything and everything given any circumstance that ends up really bothering me, I think, about the story. But I guess I'm a little more cynical than that, and I don't think that it's necessarily realistic to think that one person could have accomplished everything that Ryland accomplishes in this story. But again, that's neither here nor there. It's just my ranting. So hopefully if you're still listening, you are here to hear my opinions on a lot of this stuff. So Ryland is going to Tau Ceti to figure out why the astrophage are not consuming that star. So he was put in a coma for the trip because the trip was going to take like years. I can't remember, like 4 years or something. They talk about some time dilation stuff and a lot of other science stuff that I don't know anything about. Again, the book does put a lot of the science stuff in easy terms for somebody like me who doesn't know like a ton about science to understand, as well as Ryland even mentions a lot of the times that he doesn't understand some stuff, and that I'm good with. I like that part of the book, that Ryland does feel very much relatable, aside from the fact that he can pretty much do no wrong. Okay. So we get a lot of flashbacks back and forth between the Project Hail Mary being built, everything that Earth was doing in order to make this project happen, because essentially the whole world kind of comes together, because if they don't, everybody's going to die anyways, right? Another thing that I don't fully believe would happen. Again, go back and listen to my 3-body problem episode, because I 100%, especially in today's environment, do not believe that the world could come together even for an event like this. As horrible as that sounds and as shitty as it is to say, I personally don't believe every single government agency would align in order to make something like this happen. And this book seems to think that it would happen. That for sure, all these countries would just drop all their differences and everything that's going on in order to make this happen. And a lot of that is centered around Strat. And again, she's pretty much given the keys to the kingdom. There's nothing that's out of reach for her. They say as much, basically, that, money is not an option. Everything that they need will be given to them. And that's very clear in the way that things had to go in order to make the ship, the Hail Mary, a success, in order to make it to Tau Ceti and solve this problem. Now, at one point, Ryland gets a little upset because he remembers this is essentially a suicide mission. There's only enough food and supplies to last him, essentially for him to get to Tau Ceti, figure out what he needed to figure out, and then there's these other things on the ship called Beatles, which are named after the Beatles, the band, which just, I don't know why, that bothers me too. He was supposed to gather whatever information he could find at Tau Ceti and then send these things back to Earth for people on Earth to use. The expectation is that he is not going to survive this. Him and his other 2 crewmates. We don't ever actually find out why the other 2 crewmates died during the transit. Ryland was woken up shortly before his arrival at Tau Ceti, and when he gets to Tau Ceti, he realizes there's actually another ship there. It is an alien vessel, very much so, and it will be referred to as the Blip A. So, not only is this a science fiction book, this is a first contact with aliens type of book, okay? And at first I thought, oh, it's just going to be like from ship to ship. And that's still pretty cool. Like, I was interested in this. I was like, oh, okay. So what's he going to do? Why is there another ship circling Tau Ceti? Through a series of events, Ryland gets in contact with this other ship. And he finds out that the ship and their technology is far different than Earth and humans, which is great. They're aliens. It's supposed to be. I did like that. Through several different communication things, essentially, he finds out that the alien ship wants to move alongside his and actually bridge the two. They have the technology to build a tunnel between the two ships. And I like the way they communicate. They actually send him like these little pod things that have like a 3D printed image, which is pretty sweet. I did really like that. So they make this maneuver happen. They get the ships next to each other. Ryland realizes that their ship is also powered by astrophage. So he realizes that's something they have in common. Once the two ships are married together, Ryland actually gets to see this alien on board the ship. It is described as a kind of spider-looking being. I still don't fully know how to envision this thing. One thing I really like about this thing is that it doesn't speak, obviously, like we do, but it speaks more in just tones, like musical tones almost. And this is where I was talking about before, that they did a lot of editing. There's a lot of heavy editing in this. And I think maybe this is too where they say that the written text obviously is going to differ from what you're hearing, because we as the listener just hear tones. But it comes across very well, I will say that. So now Ryland has to figure out how to communicate with this being that he will call Rocky from here on out. So through a pretty long series of events, Ryland learns how to communicate with this being. I do like this, that he gets a computer and has the computer listen to the tones that Rocky makes, and in conjunction with him, pointing to something and saying the English word for it, right? Clock or what have you. And then hearing this Iridian, which we will refer to Rocky as, that is where his race is from, is Iridini, I believe. The computer actually starts to build this dialogue between the two of them, so that whatever Rocky is saying can then be directly translated through the computer into English. And eventually they spend enough time together that Ryland just kind of learns to understand the tones. But we as the listener hear, once Rocky starts speaking in English, this very cool kind of modulated voice that they put over Ray Porter's voice. And I think it turned out very good. I really like this. I don't think enough books fully take advantage of technology like this. Now, that's not to say that I want to see any artificial intelligence bullshit in my audiobooks, okay? You guys know how I feel about that. I don't want to see virtual voices. I don't want to see anything like that. However, this, I do feel like, enhances this story. The digital enhancement of the narrator's voice, like I said before, I think takes a lot of burden off of him and just allows him to do the narration, knowing that it will be fixed later. It alleviated him from having to do some crazy, beep, boop, boop, alien noises. So I think that took probably, and I would love to know what, how Ray Porter felt about it, if that were the case. If he was the one who suggested that, if somebody else was the one who suggested that. But I think it's used to excellent effect in this book. And I didn't really want to talk about it before the spoiler wall, because obviously then I would have spoiled it, that the main character gets to meet and talk to an alien. So again, I just think this was extremely effective, and I hope to see this type of technology used for future books. So that's just my opinion on it. Please feel free to let me know your opinion on it if you've also listened to it and how you felt about it. So again, through a series of a lot of events, basically Ryland finds out Rocky is here at Tau Ceti for the exact same reason he is. Rocky's son for his planet is also dying. We find out, too, that Rocky does not see as you and I might see. Rocky actually sees through, essentially, sonar. So they send sounds out, and those sounds come back, and that gives him kind of a 3D layout of what's around him. I like this a lot. I think that's very cool, because he's an alien. I like the idea that he is very alien, okay? Where I think that this part of the story breaks down is that as it goes on, he feels less and less alien because he's written very human by the end. Now, obviously, it's written by a human for humans, so that does make sense to an extent. But even things like the fact that he has 5 arms, looks like a spider, doesn't speak English, all of those things end up going by the wayside, I think, by the end, and it feels like we're just following the story of 2 humans who happen to breathe different air. That's not to say that Andy Weir doesn't do a good job of reminding us that Rocky is an alien, and that he does have 5 hands and things like that, and that his atmosphere is extremely different than ours, and that there are challenges that the 2 of them come across in order to survive together. At a certain point, they actually end up both on the Hail Mary because Rocky believes that Ryland's science is better than Iridian's science. I take a little bit of issue with this as well, and even Ryland says this at one point, that clearly the Iridians are not as advanced as humans. I don't like that term, especially because of what we find out later. They seem to be far more advanced than humans, in my opinion. It's interesting, though, because Rocky's crew died on the way there. I believe there was 27 of them. Rocky's the only one who survived. I find that a little convenient for storytelling's sake, but that's neither here nor there. And the reason they actually died is because they can't see in spectrums of light like we do, so they had no idea about radiation going into space. Again, I take a bit of an issue with that. I feel like something that could even feasibly travel through space would have come up with ways of mitigating this. But again, that's neither here nor there. These are nitpicks. I want to be very clear about that. These are nitpicks from me personally. Rocky is the engineer of his ship, so he is extremely skilled at building things, fixing things, and that sort of stuff. So working together, Ryland and Rocky discover there is another life form here at Tau Ceti, known as Tau'amoeba, is what they're going to call them. And those voraciously consume astrophage. They are a predator of astrophage, which is why Tau Ceti is not dimming, because there are a lot of these other little Tau'amoeba aliens here to consume them. They find out they are on a specific planet here that's orbiting Tau Ceti. So now they come up with the idea that they're going to kind of scoop some of this atmosphere up, they're going to scoop some of those other aliens up, and they're going to take them back to their respective planets, they're going to release them, and they will hopefully consume the astrophage before the astrophage consumes their respective suns for each of their planets. So all is decided, that's all well and good. They realize that oh my gosh, my phone's going off again. They realize that the Tau'amoeba, though, cannot survive on the respective planets that they need to survive on not nearest, but the ones that the astrophage are using near the respective suns to breed. That being, I think, Venus for Earth and Third World or something is what Rocky calls it on from his sun. So in order to do this, I do like this, that Ryland comes up with kind of the way antibiotics work for people is that we use antibiotics, obviously, to help us, but the overuse of antibiotics just means that the things that they are there to fight will evolve to be resistant to them. So he thinks they can do this with these Tau'amoeba, and they come up with a way to, basically they make the environment a little more harsh each time for these Tau'amoeba, and they slowly evolve them so that they can survive on the respective planets they need them to survive on. So once they do this, they think they're good to go. So Ryland and Rocky both say their goodbyes. They spend a lot of time together, and it is enjoyable. Rocky is an enjoyable character, and I do think, even though I said it feels like two humans, I do think that he is alien enough throughout the story that it definitely keeps it interesting. So they decide to part ways, and Ryland gets astrophage from Rocky because Rocky's ship has so much more astrophage than his. So Ryland now thinks he'll be able to survive. He should be able to get back to Earth with all this information, and he should be able to survive, even though it was supposed to technically be a suicide mission. And I glossed over a lot here. I know that. They spend a lot of time near Tau Ceti, and they do all kinds of crazy experiments, and they got to do all kinds of crazy shit in order to come to this conclusion that taking the Tau'amoeba back to their respective planets is the solution to the astrophage. So Rocky gets back on his ship through a series. They got to kind of rejoin their ships in order for Rocky to get back on his, and then and they part. They go separate ways. But not before Rocky had to rebuild some of Ryland's fuel pods and some other stuff. Again, nitpick here, Rocky basically figures out human technology immediately. And I don't really like that, but maybe it's due to him being such an alien that he's able to figure it out. But anyways, he had to rebuild these though because the Tau'amoeba actually got into Ryland's fuel supply. Now, like I said, they are extremely voracious once they start eating the astrophage. They consume it very rapidly, and their properties are nothing like astrophage. So once his fuel tank was essentially consumed and was full of Tau'amoeba, that tank is useless. So he came up with a way to purge them. He uses nitrogen and things like that. He came up with a way to fix it. But at some point he did have to jettison a few of his fuel tanks, which is what led him to think that he would not be able to make it back to Earth, because there's no way he could even hold enough astrophage to make it. So Rocky rebuilds his fuel tanks, and they go on their way. But Ryland realizes that also means that the Tau'amoeba escaped the little experiments they were doing in order to get in the ship. Now, they thought they had it figured out before they parted ways. However, after not even that long, Ryland realizes he has a problem again. The Tau'amoeba get back into the fuel supply. So he knows that if this happened on his ship, it probably happened on Rocky's ship as well. There's a part where he's kind of, as they're going away from each other, he keeps kind of looking back so he can see the Petrova line, essentially, that Rocky's ship is leaving because of the astrophage propulsion. He realizes he's not seeing this anymore. So now he's concerned that Rocky had the same problem. And Rocky had no way of sending his information back to his planet. They don't have computers or anything like that. So Rocky really had to get back to his planet. And Iridians are long-lived. They live like 600 Earth years or some crazy shit like that. So there was no question about whether or not he'd be able to make it back alive. I think that the trip for Ryland was supposed to take something like 13 years. But they talk about time dilation because they're traveling so close to the speed of light. So it was only going to take him like 4 years. But basically round trip for him to get there, do his research, and get the information back to Earth, it was going to take something like 26 years. And by all estimates, if the astrophage continued to consume the sun at the rate that they were, then the sun would essentially be useless to Earth in about 30 years from the time the story starts. So he was not going to have a whole lot of time for his turnaround. So Ryland comes up with the idea that he is going to, well, they kind of try to leave it on some kind of weird cliffhanger. Basically, he has a choice now. Does he go back to Earth and save Earth, or does he turn around and try to go find Rocky and save Rocky and possibly save all of the Iridians, right? Because Rocky has the answer to their problem. So Ryland makes the choice to go ahead and send the Beatles with the information and some of the Tau'amoeba back to Earth, and he goes back to rescue Rocky. He finds Rocky's ship, and he basically tells Rocky he knows what happened, that the Tau'amoeba, basically while they were breeding the Tau'amoeba to be resistant, to be able to survive on the planets they needed to survive on, they also bred in them the ability to hide within the xenonite, which is essentially what Rocky's ship is made of. Basically, they were trying to selectively evolve them, and that's not how evolution works. And they evolved their own traits that worked against them. And I did like this. I liked that little twist of the story. But once Ryland goes and essentially fixes the problem for Rocky, he realizes now he is going to die because he went back the wrong way and he doesn't have enough food to make it back to Earth. And he thinks it's too risky to put himself back into a coma. Oh, I should mention too that he was selected for the mission. Now that I'm almost at the end of the story, the whole reason Ryland is on the mission, even though at first Ryland started out as just a scientist working on solving these problems, he ends up on the mission actually fully against his own will, which I actually kind of liked. They had a crew set to go on the mission, and there was very strict things they needed to follow because they were going to be put into a coma for the vast majority of the trip. They needed to have this specific trait, and I don't know if this thing's real or not. Somebody please let me know. But basically, most people who experience a very long, deep coma essentially lose a lot of their memories, right? They, like most of them. But there's a very selective trait that some people have where this doesn't happen to them, and they retain their memories. It just might take them a long time to recover them. Ryland had this trait. However, Ryland didn't want to go. He refused to go on the trip because he didn't want to die, even though Strat said, if you don't go, we're all going to die anyways. Strat basically said he has to go. He doesn't have a choice. They were going to sedate him and put him in the ship and send him, regardless. So Ryland was there and didn't actually want to go on any of this. But basically, he did what Strat assumed he would do. Once he was already on the mission, he wasn't just going to give up and not try to save humanity. So that's what happened. Okay, so back to where I was, almost the end of the book. Once Ryland saves Rocky, he basically realizes he's going to die, right? He can't eat anything that Iridians eat. It's full of all these heavy metals and stuff, and it would basically kill him. So we get a time skip, okay? And I desperately do not like the end of this book. I'm sorry. I do not like this. So we jump. Ryland goes to the Iridani planet with Rocky. I'm sorry, it's Arid. I was saying that wrong. I should have looked it up before. And I heard it about 1,000,000 times when I listened to the book. I should have known. So, my bad. Ryland goes back to Arid with Rocky. And this is a long time skip, like 26 years, that he has been living there on Arid. Basically, the Iridians figured out how to make a bubble, essentially, for him to live in that mimics Earth's atmosphere. Which is saying a lot because everything that was described, Arid's atmosphere you wouldn't even be able to like attempt to survive on it. So a lot of the dirty stuff was skipped. How he got onto the planet, how he didn't die getting there, how they even came up with the technology to keep him alive. All this stuff is skipped over, okay? There's some very weird stuff that the Iridians find out how to synthesize human meat. All of these things just go back to what I said before, that it really bothers me that Ryland thought Iridians didn't have the same technology or as advanced of technology as humans. This is addressed. I do like that it is addressed as to why both Iridians and humans need to solve this astrophage problem. And essentially what the conclusion is that if they were any less technologically savvy, they would just die. And if they were more technologically savvy, they could have just solved it already, most likely without even going to the trouble of going to Tau Ceti. So I do like that question is answered within the book. Basically, though, right here at the end of the book, we find out that the Iridian scientists were watching Sol, Earth's sun, and realized that it is getting brighter. So it worked. Project Hail Mary worked. The Beatles got back to Earth, and clearly scientists on Earth figured out what they needed to do with the Tau Amoeba, and Earth is saved, at least till now, or, at this point. Obviously, Arid is saved because he and Rocky basically told them exactly what they needed to do with the Tau Amoeba in order to save them from the astrophage. I think the reason I didn't like it so much is it's almost a little too perfect and too much of a happy ending for me. And I know that sounds terrible. I just think that too many pieces align too perfectly for me for it to feel very believable. And I know it's science fiction and I know it's just a story, but there's just a lot of issues I take with it, especially in that regard. So yeah, that's Project Hail Mary. And those are my opinions about it. please, again, feel free to share with me what you think I missed. I know I skipped a lot of parts of the story. I'm not as concerned about that. What am I missing? Why is this book so incredibly popular? Clearly my thoughts on it do not align with most people. So what is it that I am missing? I've checked a few times and no one's held a gun to the back of my head and told me I have to leave a 5-star review. So please feel free to share your thoughts on this one with me, because I definitely feel like I'm missing something here. So again, thank you all so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. I know there are a few of you who show up every time, and I could never say thank you enough. So thank you guys for that. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I really hope to catch you in the next one.